Hello, good evening and welcome to episode 7 of the eFootball podcast. Apologies for last week, computer gremlins did get the better of me, but I'm glad to say we're back on board this evening. James McCarthy has somehow got a week off. I don't know how he's managed that, but that's not to say we're not going to have a good show, because joining me once again for his second cap is Anthony Kendrick. How are you, Anthony?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, glad to be back for a second time. Good to be here. Looking forward to it.
Cheers, mate. Glad to have you. And also, we're going to have one hell of a show because we've got Dmitri Colville from Hull Fan TV. How are you doing, Dmitri?
I'm good, thanks, Dan. My name's Dmitri. I'm from Hull Fans TV, and I'm delighted to be on the podcast.
It's a pleasure to have you, mate. So, debut cap. Let's make it a good one. The question I always ask at the beginning of the show is the most important one. Have you watched any football in the past 7 days?
Yes, I have, actually. I took the trip across the Pennines to the Etihad and watched Hull City play fairly poorly against Man City and lose 3-1.
Okay, well, good answer. We'll come to that later. Anthony, have you been researching on your football this week?
I have been. Unfortunately, not seen anything live, but yeah, I watched plenty on the TV. I was away doing some hiking the weekend, so unfortunately didn't get to see anything live. But yeah, plenty of TV. Should
That's
be good.
Right. Yeah, we don't expect you to literally go and watch live games. They are a bonus, but watching match of the day and the like is absolutely fine. So, as always, we'll start with Premier League action and what's happened over the weekend. And where better place to start than at the top? Chelsea, well, they've answered another big question, haven't they? They've seen the gap cut to 4 points at the beginning of the day. It's now back to 7. Anthony, do you reckon, we keep saying, one final hurdle cleared, but you just can't see them dropping any more points at the moment, can you? Is this sort of wrapped up for them now, or do you reckon there's still a final twist in the tail?
I think the big game, because they play United next, that's the crew. If they lose that, then the pressure's on, but I think if they win that, it's game over. Personally, I'd still make Chelsea favourites and I wouldn't bet against them, but I think, should United get a win, then it's game back on, and we've got an exciting podcast, we've got an exciting end to the season. But yeah, for me, Chelsea have won it.
And Dmitri, same question for you.
I reckon Chelsea have won it too, to be honest. I think I can't see Tottenham catching up with them, unfortunately. I think they suffered a bit of a hiccup when they lost Crystal Palace at home. But after you've lost at home, what do? You go out and win away. Good win for them against Bournemouth, and I think there's still a few games to be played, but I'm gonna go with Chelsea.
They just seem to be doing what's required, really. People had their sort of doubts perhaps after the Palace defeat, and we all thought, hang on, there's a title race on the horizon here. But wins against City, wins against Bournemouth, it's almost, Anthony, do you not reckon that Tottenham are winning but still standing still because they can't seem to do anything else at the moment, can they?
No, Tottenham's form's been fantastic since Christmas, since New Year. It's been fantastic, but it's just not enough, because Chelsea's form's also they've been very consistent all season. They've had, I guess partly it's down to the luck of injuries and such, and not playing European football. But yeah, to focus on Tottenham rather than just going Chelsea, as the question asked. Tottenham have played very good football, and personally, they're probably my favourite team to watch. Dele Alli's he's stepped it up a level. I know people had their doubts about him, but he's really come on, and as a team they play really exciting, really good football. They're coping without Harry Kane, and it's sad really, because there's not a lot more they can do. They have played fantastic, and all they can do is keep winning games, play as well as they are, and hope that Chelsea lose they drop 7 points basically to fail to win 3 games. But yeah, harsh on Tottenham because they have played very well.
It's almost Groundhog Day in a sense for Tottenham, because they were doing this last season where they were winning games, but then Leicester kept finding that form again. It was a case of pushing the league leaders as far as you can, but then again, they somehow then find that result that they needed. So Tottenham could never quite bridge the gap. It was always 7 or perhaps 4 with a game then to be played afterwards. So frustrating for Tottenham. But I guess, Dmitri, do you not think it's probably more of its success this season if they finish second, because it's probably a tougher league to finish second in, if that makes sense? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think it must be frustrating being, for Tottenham to finish kind of second again. But, I don't think, and I'm not a Tottenham fan obviously, but I don't think you can be too disappointed with second. I think, finishing, it's an improvement on last season. You've gone up a place, you finished second. And it's Champions League football again, which, with no disrespect, that's still good for Tottenham. I know you got trapped in Europa League football for quite a few seasons, and I think as long as they take Chelsea all the way, there's no dignity in finishing second this season. There's no dignity lost in finishing second this season, and I think they can be happy with the season.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I mean, I'm a Spurs fan, as people probably know by now who've listened to this podcast, and if someone offered me second in this situation, then I'd probably take it, because I don't think that in itself is done and dusted with the pack of teams behind. So they certainly can't rest on their laurels, but like we sort of say, they can only do what they're doing the right stuff. So as long as they can keep Chelsea honest, perhaps, it'd be great if it could go to the last day. Whether I'd enjoy that, I don't know, but I think in this situation I would probably put them slight favourites to win the FA Cup. I just think they're playing a bit better than Chelsea, and I think if that can perhaps soften the blow somewhat, that they might not win the league, but at least might actually get a trophy for the first time in 9 seasons, then that will be at least something. In terms of the race for the top 4, it's getting more interesting. Well, it's not getting any less interesting for sure, because everyone has won. I mean, this is recorded on Monday, so we can't really say how Arsenal have done, but the pressure is on them because the whole of the other teams around them got maximum points. Anthony, how do you see this race for the top 4 panning out? If we take the top 2 out of the equation, and we then just say 36, how do you see it sort of panning out now between now and the end of the season?
That's a horrible question, because obviously the top 2 is the top 2. Assuming, well, I don't know, I guess for the sake of argument, let's assume Arsenal have won their game. That's them and United both 57 points, but with a game in hand, 4 or 5 points off the 3rd, 4th, 2 games in hand off Liverpool, 6 behind them. So it's so tight. It's hard to call. United have had that long unbeaten run, but drawn too many games. I think what it'll come down to, I'm going to discount United because of the Europa League option for them. And if it comes down to it, United can go for the Europa League, and that would be the smart thing to do to get in the Champions League next season. I don't know. I'd say, and perhaps I'd say perhaps Liverpool because of Sadio Mane's injury. I think I'll say Liverpool to miss out. So what's that? Chelsea, Spurs, City, Arsenal will be my top 4. But it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point, and I'm going to ask the question to Dmitri actually. Do you reckon that Manchester United will be the wild card in all of this, because they're almost in a sort of, I wouldn't say false position, but the fact that, as Anthony has alluded to, say if they drop points in the next game, lose to Chelsea, do you reckon then Mourinho will just say, right, that's enough, then we're going to put all our eggs into the Europa League basket and get into the Champions League that way? I
think that's definitely the logical way to do it. That's how I think I'd do it, but I'm not Jose Mourinho. I don't know what he's going to do. I do think it'll certainly appeal to Man United fans, because potentially if they win the Europa League, they could take either Manchester City or Liverpool's Champions League spot, depending on who finishes 4th. So there's that level to it, although I doubt that'll matter as much to the players. But I think the Europa League's definitely winnable for them, and it's silverware at the end of the day, in Jose Mourinho's first season. So logically, I think that's the best way to go about it. Will they go about it that way? I couldn't tell you. I don't really know what to make of Mourinho still.
Yeah, I mean, I think logic would dictate that. It's a gamble perhaps, because I think if you look at, say, Liverpool last season, I think Jurgen Klopp sort of weighed that up and went down that route, because he used the last half a dozen games to then sort of bed not new players, but sort of look at his squad, see who he wanted, who he didn't over the summer, and really sort of run through it completely. But as we all know, they then lost the final and ended up finishing 8th in the league. But it's a gamble that if it works, it's great and it makes sense, but if it doesn't, then it could be no European football at all. So, well, actually no, that's a lie, because they won the EFL Cup, so they will get the Europa League anyway. But obviously a club like Man United are going to want more, so they are the wild card. But I'll go back to you, Dmitri. How costly do you think Liverpool's draw at home to Bournemouth was last week? Because if they won that, there would have been 8 points clear with 2 games in hand, and then qualification is in their hands completely. So is that going to be a key result come the end of the season, do you reckon?
I think it could be season defining, because even on, we often see results, just the significance of the result is perhaps more costly than the actual points, because a point's still a point at the end of the day, but they just can't seem to get out of this rut again, of struggling against average sides. We saw them this season early on just blow away teams, especially at home, blow away these poorer teams. They beat us. They beat us very comfortably. They beat Watford about, I think, 5-1. They beat Leicester 4-1. They were just smashing through teams. But now I don't know what it is, but they just can't seem to break down teams at home as well. You'd expect it to be away. I think that point could, back at the end of the season, you could think, well, points like that, if they would have got 2 more, then they could have finished here, or they could have finished in Champions League, or they could have finished second. But I think the title's definitely off for them now, so I'm not sure how costly it will be in the long term. I think they should be able to secure Champions League football, but I think it's not good for the team morale and the team spirit, and they're rut against average teams right now.
Anthony, when you couple those drop points and then Mane and Lallana out, do you reckon that's sort of pointing to missing out the top 4 then?
I think they will, and it is, I think they will, but you're splitting hairs. I think if you look at Liverpool without Mane this season, I've actually got the stats in front of me. They played in 6 games and they only won 1 out of 6. And Liverpool play 6 games in the season. I'm not suggesting they're only going to win 1 game, but there will be a drop in their form. And for me, because of those factors, I think Liverpool will miss out. But it's not like a definite, I definitely think they will. It's one of those sort of flaky, politician style responses to your question, because it's, I could quite easily be wrong. It's not one of them I'm saying with any authority or confidence.
Oh no, that's fair enough. I mean, there's still a lot of football to be played, so it'd be unfair to sort of get black and white answers now. But the way it's panning out, for me, I think that draw could be really, really costly. And I think also it does sort of give Arsenal a bit of rejuvenation now, because if we sort of assume that, we're just sort of saying that Liverpool aren't going to finish in the top 4, and then Man United might then throw the rest of the league games to focus on the Europa League, then it opens the door massively for Arsenal and almost puts it sort of back into their hands. So again, we have to work on the assumption that they have beaten Palace, although that's not a given, of course. But then, things don't seem too bad at the Emirates. But again, they could have a collapse between the end of the season, but they seem to then find their form, don't they, between sort of now and May, and everything's all right again to get back into the top 4. So they're certainly not out of it. Manchester City have done their bit, and we'll focus on their opposition, which was Hull. Dimitri, you said you went to the game. I only saw a match of the day. Is it fair to say that City didn't really need to get out of second gear? No,
I think if you were looking to pick out an example, if you look at someone who's been very crucial for them, very key recently, Leroy Sané, he never even seemed to, really get going. He seemed quite tired, actually. But then that just shows, he's been really important to them recently, and he was, I don't know how to put it, but he basically, they didn't really go through him that much. They just seemed to kind of grind away, keep on grinding. They just kept on attacking us. They were always in control. They were passing it around us, controlling it. John Stones had quite a good game. And then you saw the first goal that they got. That just kind of settled it down for them a bit. That was no goal. But then, after that, they really kind of settled into the game. I think that definitely settled some nerves, because we held them. We held them. It was 1-0 at half-time. And I said, to the person I was with, 1-0 at half-time, that's not the worst position to be, because as Hull City fan, especially going away, it's genuinely by how many goals do we lose. So I said that's not the worst position to be in, and then they kind of just controlled the second half. Eventually we got a goal, but that was through a Bravo goalkeeping mistake, and they always looked like they were going to win, to be honest.
Yeah, that's sort of fair enough, but I guess, and that's no disrespect to Hull, is a game like that, is it almost like a free hit because you're going in with no real expectations? I know you've won 2 before, but it's sort of, if you can get anything from this, it's a bonus. And I guess you're really more looking at what Swansea do than opposed to sort of what you're doing at Manchester. Is that sort of fair enough? Or
no, that's definitely fair, because we had 2 after the international break. We knew that we had 2 crucial home games against West Ham and Middlesbrough, and we had to get 6 points. Some people were saying 4. I said, those kind of games, if you want to stay up in the Premier League, you have to be winning those. We won both of those, and that allowed us to go to Man City, as you say, a bit of a free hit. At the end of the day, we're away from home at Manchester City, the 4th, we're 17. The most you can hope for, in my opinion, was a point. If we'd beaten them, that would have been just a massive shock. But the only thing I was hopeful of was a draw, but that was never really likely.
I guess, nothing's really changed, but we'll come back to the sort of relegation battle in a bit. Anthony, I just want to focus on City's goalkeeping, because it's another game, another blunder. If we look at Caballero, he's sort of perhaps a bit unlucky in midweek at Stamford Bridge, but does Bravo once again highlight the weaknesses that City have at the back?
Oh, of course. Claudio Bravo was a good keeper at Barcelona. And he's just one of those players who doesn't suit the Premier League. I mean, you get wingers or, attacking players or, any outfield position, and you just say, they're a fantastic player, but they're just not suited to the Premier League, or a very good player or whatever. Bravo's clearly a good shot stopper. He's proved himself as a good shot stopper, but just at City it's not worked out. And I think part of it is almost Guardiola's I don't know if arrogance is the word or not, but his insistence on doing things his way is why he got rid of Joe Hart. And I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens at the end of the season with their goalkeeper. Whether Joe Hart comes back from his loan, whether Caballero, because Caballero is a solid keeper, but he's not a good enough to be a first choice keeper for a team like City, but he's a good second choice keeper. Very interested to see what happens. But I do think everyone likes laughing at Bravo, but you don't be a mug playing for Barcelona, do you?
No, absolutely not. But do you feel perhaps that you touched on arrogance in inverted commas? Is that arrogance going to see Bravo stay in the summer, or do you reckon that they'll sort of say that it's not worked and he'll be off? I mean,
it's difficult. I guess if Guardiola wants him to stay, I think personally, I think it'll be down to Bravo. If Bravo, there's two ways he could look at it. He could look at it and think, I don't like the media being on my back. I don't like this. I want to leave. Go to Spain or wherever and have a bit less media pressure. He could think of it that way, which is a reasonable way to think of it. He could also look at it the other way and be like, say a De Gea, where the media criticised him to start with, and it made him more determined to prove people wrong. And I think it'll be down to the goalkeeper. I think,
Yeah, I think perhaps it is age. He probably thinks, I don't really need this hassle, when you can just sort of apply his trade somewhere else where there's less pressure, less spotlight on him. So we'll have to wait and see. But personally, I think it's certainly an area they need to improve on if they are going to sort of win the title next season. But it was never going to be sort of a team that could perhaps win the title straight away. I still think Pellegrini left them in not a mess, but there was still a lot of work to be done. It's not like Chelsea where they were a title winning team playing badly. I still think that was a City team that was at the end of its cycle and is probably still going to need a good overhaul in the summer. So we'll have to see how that one pans out over the next few months. That covers the top of the table, the top six. I'm just going to do the social media bits, and then we'll focus more at the bottom of the table on the battle to beat the drop. So, as always, if you want to follow us on Twitter or Instagram, it's @e_footballnet. If you want to follow us on Facebook, it's facebook.com/efootballpage. If you want to follow us on the website, it's www.efootballonline.com. And if you've got any questions for the show, you can tweet me at DanTracy1983, or you can tweet the page itself, which is @e_footballnet. So we'll be back after this very short break. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. I hope you've had your Lucasade all refreshed, because it's part 2 of the eFootball podcast. We focused on the top of the table. We're now going to focus on the bottom, and where else to start but Hull. So, Dmitri, they lost on Saturday, which we've sort of just gone through. It's not, that's not going to define their season, but 2 massive wins in the week previous. A lot of people said Marco Silva but it's seeming to be a very inspired managerial choice at the moment, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have to admit I'm a Hull City fan, and I was saying that as well. I don't blame anyone else that did. I think a lot of Hull City fans answered that, asked that question. But when we saw his pedigree, unlike Paul Merson, we did respect that he'd gone on that very good run with Olympiacos. And, if you look at that stat of his unbeaten home form across 4 clubs, that is phenomenal. And I think when he came in, the impact was immediate. The players said that there was no more taking training, there was no more messing around in training, the players took it more seriously. And that, to be fair, made me question why they were ever messing around in training, and kind of made me think why we was in the situation we was in. But you could see, he brought in his own backroom staff, and just immediately the players played with more purpose. Under Steve Bruce and Mike Phelan, I love both managers, but we didn't really have a plan B. We always just seemed to go to the same route, which is just play it down the wing, cross it in. But with Marco Silva, we've been passing it forward, been passing it around. Players have been running at players more, who wouldn't have necessarily before. He's giving them more confidence, more purpose. And I think all teams have a boost when they get a new manager in. I don't think that's anything unusual, but it's gone beyond that initial period of initial purple patch.
Yeah, because this isn't just like a new manager lift. This is sustained form now. And Anthony, do you not reckon it's really rejuvenated their season? Because without being sort of harsh, they were looking a bit of a mess before Christmas, weren't they?
Yeah, Mike Phelan made a very good start to the season, and then after that, there weren't any wins for a long time. And Marco Silva's proved himself as a really good appointment. I remember saying after I think his first game was the cup game against United, the 2 legs. And over them 2 legs, I know Hull didn't get through, but they put in it was such a good performance I saw from Holland. He got the maximum out of that team. You can see that, they're obviously not going to beat, the likes of City and that, but it against, lower bottom half Premier League clubs, they do play well, and I think they're as good as any team in the bottom 10.
To be fair, our away form hasn't improved under Marco Silva, but at home, we've done really well. We've won 7 now, drawn 4 and lost 5. It's just our away form that's got us in the position we are. But a lot of fans are asking, generally, where we would be if we'd had Marco Silva from the beginning of the season and not halfway through.
I think you'd probably have to base it on perhaps Burnley. If you look at their home form versus their away form, they can't buy a win away, but they're still keeping their heads above water. They've never really been in a relegation battle. So you would probably sort of assume that if your home form was as good over the course of the season with Silva, then you'd probably be looking in the same position. But all credit to him, he's come in, he's keeping you alive, because if without that, you'd probably be cast adrift with Sunderland and Middlesbrough by now, and the battle to beat the drop would probably be done and dusted. But looking at the table now and the points that other teams have got, do you reckon it's now going to be a straight shootout between Hull and Swansea to avoid that last relegation place?
No, I don't.
No?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, I'll follow that then. Who do you reckon will get dragged into the mix then still?
Well, I know this sounds a bit antagonistic, but if you look at just the Premier League table in general, Leicester City are 11th and they're 6 points ahead of us. I still think the relegation battle, anywhere from 17 to 11 could end up in that, 18 to 11 could end up in that 18th spot, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think right now it's looking more likely, like actually directly right now, obviously Swansea are 2 points below us and they're looking in a precarious position. But, Bournemouth, West Ham, Stoke, they've all been struggling recently, and they're only 6 points ahead of us, West Ham and Stoke. Bournemouth are 5 points ahead of us. Crystal Palace have got 2 games in hand, but I think there's still a lot of football to be played. But I do think 19th and 20th, Middlesbrough and Sunderland, I think those are relegated now. I do think that there's only the 18 spot to play for. Yeah,
Anthony, do you reckon that Sunderland and Middlesbrough are now preparing for life in the Championship?
I think Middlesbrough, perhaps. I don't know about Middlesbrough. I'm not sure about Sunderland. I think I can imagine David Moyes being very stubborn and still insisted. I think he insisted that there was no reason why they can't stay up and their form can't turn around, and that they can't do another great escape ache into other seasons. But I think Middlesbrough might be preparing for it a bit, because they still haven't appointed a permanent manager. They seem to be taking the time over that, perhaps waiting to see when they're relegated and then swiftly dismissing Steve Agnew as their caretaker and bringing someone in permanently. I think they should have kept Karanka to the end of the season personally, but that's just me.
Oh, bold. Anthony, what do you reckon about Sunderland and Borough? Are they sort of job done? You can sort of cast them off now?
I think they're done, but I think they're almost certainly going to get relegated. I'll say that a bit more confidently than City finishing in the top 4. But yeah, no, those two are gone for me. But I think just to raise a point that was made just then about Moyes having still believing that Sunderland can stay up. I think he's right being confident. Like you look at the Football League, for example, and I think a good example is a team like Leyton Orient. I know it's off topic a bit, but their manager is not giving up, and they're in a far worse position. I think if their manager comes out and just says, "Yeah, we're going to get relegated," or it's looking bad for us, then how do the players feel going out on the game? How do the fans feel supporting their team? I think a manager's got to fight until it's mathematically impossible. I think it's the same all across the division. It's Chelsea fighting for the title, whether it's until Sunderland are mathematically down, their manager has to keep fighting for every point and having that confidence in the players. But yeah, Sunderland, Middlesbrough for me are gone, and then it's that scrap for the final place.
Yeah, it's a fair point you make, because you can't have David Moyes coming out and saying, right, we're relegated, we don't care anymore, because what message does that send? But if you look realistically, they've got 20 points from their first 30 games, and let's all assume that you need 40 points to stay up. So it's taken them 28 games to get there, because they've lost the last 2 or 3. So they've got 8 games to go to get the same amount of points that they've taken in the first 3 quarters of the season. It's just not.
That's a very good way of looking at it.
Yeah, they're just not going to get that amount of points. It's going to take something sensational. You're looking at an unbeaten run now between the end of the season. It's going to take 6 wins, 2 draws, or 7 wins and a defeat for them to have any chance of staying up. But with all the sort of teams that are, in that bracket that you mentioned of, say, 10th to 17th, 10th to 18th, do you reckon that even 40 points might not be enough this season?
I think 40 points will be enough, to be honest. I think it's always enough, and I think this season it'll probably be the same.
Right. What about you, Anthony?
I don't know. It's such a difficult call for that final spot, isn't it? I don't know.
Okay, I'll add a bit more context to it then. Because if you look at the table and say that if we took the bottom half of the table, and I think the top of that is on 36 points, so that's 11th place, I think, 36 points.
Yeah.
So we'll assume that each team from 11th to 16th, 17th probably only need one more win to stay up. So if they all get their one win, you're then looking at probably Palace, Swansea and Hull to then fight over that last relegation place. So who's going to be fighting for it, really? Can we say that a lot of them are already safe, or is there still going to be some dramatic collapse from a team that might not win the last sort of 7 or 8 and then get really sucked in? Or do you reckon it's now starting to pull away and we've only sort of left with 2 or 3 clubs left in the mix?
Well, I'll put it another way for me. If you say if it's 40 points enough, I'd look at 18th place Swansea, who are on 28 points. I don't think Swansea are going to win 4 of their last 6 games.
Yeah, good point.
So 40 points will be enough. 40 points, I think you're safe. For me, I think Swansea are going down. I think, you look at the other teams, Palace have got a couple of games in hand. Well, depending on what happened against Arsenal, they've got a game in hand. Are just above. I think realistically, you're looking at Palace or Hull. Palace. It's Bournemouth, Palace, Hull, and Swansea. I think Swansea will go down. I think Hull have got some really good players. I know. Sorry to go back to them, but I think as well as the manager, I think they signed some really good players in January. Ranocchi has made a decent start. Umar Nias, who looked like a nothingy player at Everton, has had a good couple of games. And
I love Umar Nias. Great player. He's really got a chip on his shoulder, I think. They've proven something to Everton. Yeah,
I think so. He's got a point to prove. I really like him. He's not the best player in the world, but he's got that determination and that.
He scores goals. He grinds and he scores goals.
Yeah, my favourite player though, Kamil Grosicki, the winger. I'm a big fan of his. As soon as they signed him, I said he was the one, and I really like him. I think Hull will stay up myself, and Swansea will go down. And to answer your question, 40 points will be enough because Swansea won't get to 40.
Brilliantly wraps up there. Well done, Anthony. I'll go over to Swansea now, and Dmitri, do you feel that Swansea's form has deserted them at just the wrong time?
Yes, I think, to be fair, Paul Clement, I'm a big fan of him, and I think when he came in, I thought, oh well, because I'd thought Swansea were dead and buried, but they had a real resurgence under him. They got that win against Liverpool at Anfield, which I don't know how they did that, and I don't really know what's happened to them recently. You're looking at the last 5 games, they've lost 4, drawn 1. I think they've got to improve. They got a good win over Burnley. They had to grind for that, and they got that win, and that was, you're looking at that and you're thinking that's crucial. That's a bit of a, Burnley are 12, but they're only 8 points ahead of Swansea, so you're still thinking that's a bit of a relegation kind of 6-pointer. And I still think they've got a lot of fight in them. Unlike Middlesbrough and Sunderland, they've still got fight, and I think they still really believe they can stay up. And they've still got some quality players in their team, but I don't know. I just don't think they might have enough this season.
Anthony, do you reckon that the run of games they've had where they've picked up just 1 point in those 5, really the games they've played, if we sort of perhaps dismiss Tottenham, but even we'll touch on that in a minute, do you not reckon they should have got far more points out of that, and then because of that they're going to really struggle in the last run of games?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Tottenham and West Ham, the last 2 games, I guess West Ham away is, a hard place to go, and you can almost say those 2 games are almost, they're going to struggle there. But then you look at the games before that, they only drew with Middlesbrough, and they needed, that's a game they ought to have won, that, to stay up. And then, but losing to Bournemouth, and especially the Hull game, that Hull v Swansea game is a game that we'll probably look back on as, such a crucial result, I think.
Yeah, it's almost sort of kick-started 2 trajectories now, isn't it? Where Swansea are going down, Hull have surpassed them, and I think you can almost look at that game as the sort of turning point, really. Do you feel perhaps that the way that they lost to Tottenham could be really a real hammer blow because the mentality is just, shot there, haven't they? Where they've not, to be winning for 88 minutes, concede a late goal was bad enough, but then to lose 3-1, I mean, how much is that going to play on their minds for the rest of the season? Is that going to have a real detrimental effect to them?
Yeah, I think it'll have some detrimental effects, but I think not as much as losing to relegation rivals. I think it's disappointing, but I think because you can almost accept it because Tottenham are a top side. They're probably the best team to watch and the team that play the best attacking football in the division side. I'd maybe say it's disappointing, but they've just got to move on. They've just got to think that was the best side. If they'd lost 3-1 to a Stoke or something because Stoke had scored late goals, then maybe I'd agree with you. But I think because it was Tottenham, it's maybe I disagree with you there. I think the other games are more problem.
That's fair enough. You're allowed to disagree. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes a good podcast. You touched on Stoke actually. I was going to bring them up next, which is quite handy because I think they've lost the last 4 in a row, haven't they? So I mean, they're not going to go down because they've got enough points to sort of see them over the line. I would imagine, unless they go on some terrible run of sort of say 11, 12 defeats in a row. But Dmitri, I'll ask you first. Do you reckon perhaps that Mark Hughes has taken Stoke as far as he can? Is his sort of job status in a bit of danger in the summer where they might look to freshen things up? And if they do then they have to be careful, because the grass isn't necessarily green on the other side. What do you see happening at Stoke over the next few months?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that, what you said about the grass being green on the other side, because obviously you're thinking that it's harsh sometimes to sack a manager, someone like Stoke, but you've got to keep things fresh. And, they sacked Tony Pulis even though he was, delivering every season with them because they wanted to, they wanted to take the club further and the style of play wasn't that good. But I think Mark Hughes perhaps isn't getting the best out of the players, I think they've got some really, really good players in that team, really good players, and I think they should be higher than 13, definitely. I think they should be in the top 10. I think the fact that West Brom are 8 and Stoke are 13 is I think those two should really be the other way around, and I think that shares a bit of a Pulis getting back at Stoke for that, I think. But I think they've got to be cautious with whoever they appoint, because maybe Mark Hughes is doing a brilliant job and all those players are not as good as we think they are. He might be getting the best out of them. It's very hard to see things from the outside, but I'd take the risk and appoint someone new, because I think they've got to be doing better than 13. They've got some great players, and I wouldn't be that happy with Mark Hughes if I was on the board, to be honest.
Anthony, do you reckon there's a bit of a rot set in at the Bet365 stadium these days?
They're on a bad run of form, no doubt, but I'm going to disagree again. I'm sorry, but
that's all right. Don't worry.
But you say that Stoke should be a top 10 side. I mean, they're 1 point off being 10th. It's not like they're miles off. And I think because it's so competitive in that mid-table, if you look from Southampton 9th place on 40 points, Bournemouth 15th, 35 points, that's, a 5-point gap between a lot of places. And, if Stoke go and win the next game, they might be in the top 10. I think because of that, I think it's hard to be critical, because the Premier League, it's such a congested league. I mean, the top 6, plus probably Everton, West Brom, Southampton are almost in their own thing. And then after that, it's just those teams are so similar. It's hard to split them. So yeah, I think with Mark Hughes though, the point that was made, it depends on how they see Stoke. If you want to see Stoke, guaranteed as a Premier League side, then I reckon they should stick with Mark Hughes. But if they want to take that risk and try and make them into that, side that's like an Everton, say, where they're, going for Europa League most seasons, then sack Hughes and bring in someone else, but take that risk. But it could go one or two ways. For me personally, I'd keep Mark Hughes, even though, I'm sure some of the fans are unhappy, but that's what I'd do if I were chairman or whatever.
Yeah, I think you've made a fair point with the league table, because it is so congested, and they were 9th at one point, and the season looks fine then, and things aren't so bad, and it's only because they've gone this small bad run. It's only 4 losses. It's not great, obviously, but now they're where they are. Is it 13th? Where you look at Southampton, before they played on Wednesday, they were 13th. They've won 2 in a row, and now they're closing the gap on West Brom in 8th. So I mean, they're 4 points behind with 2 games in hand. So to finish 8th is in their hands, and their season looks decent now. Whereas a week ago, they're 13th, and everything's looking a bit iffy there. So you're right, the congestion almost sort of creates false positions and false scenarios, really. So, and I think ultimately it's whether Peter Coates sticks or twists in the summer and decides whether to freshen things up. Leicester, they twisted, didn't they? They went with Craig Shakespeare. His winning run has finally come to an end. Snakes in the background, he says. The winning run come to an end. But Dmitri, I guess with the Champions League on the horizon, can you understand why Shakespeare made so many changes to the team yesterday against Everton?
Well, I think, to be fair, even if Leicester had put out their full-strength side, Everton are very hard to beat at Goodison Park. You know, we've seen quite a few teams just do very well at home this year. You know, looking at Burnley, Everton, Tottenham. A lot of teams seem to have made fortresses. And Leicester's winning run had to come to an end eventually, so maybe it's not a bad time for it to end. You know, why not rest some players? I think now that they're out the relegation, actually not out the relegation battle, but I think with their form and the way they've been playing, I think they can get over that 40-point mark. And I think they can focus on the Champions League, definitely. Have a go. You know, this is once in a lifetime thing. Have a go against Atletico, give it their all. And, you know, they're one game away from the final. I believe it's the quarter-final.
Yeah, it's the quarter-final. That's right, mate. Anthony, I was going to ask the same to you. Do you reckon Shakespeare's looked at that and just thought, well, let's come to it on Wednesday. We're nearly safe. I can afford to sort of make changes here? I
think so, yeah, because as we've said, it's the congested part of the league, isn't it? And I think, you know, to Leicester fans, I don't think they care whether the team, as long as they don't get relegated, I don't think they care too much if they finish, say, 9th or 15th. I don't think it matters really. I think, you know, rightly so. I mean, we see the big teams resting players ahead of big Champions League games. Why not, you know, Leicester? I think it would be a very unfair to criticise him for it, because, you know, Leicester will stay up. You know, you'd be amazed if they got relegated. So yeah,
I love it.
Controversial there by Dmitri, but yeah, do you know what? You fit the nail on the head. Then, as a point I was going to actually make about Leicester and their fans, that at this point, whether they finish 9th or 17th, it really doesn't matter now, does it? Because after winning the title last season, their expectations are they're not. You know, it's never going to be a 1 in a million chance again. So that's not going to happen. Realistically, it's can we finish in Europe? That way it was never going to really happen by the time they got to sort of October. That wasn't going to happen. Then it was can we finish in the top 10? Then the slide sort of continued, and then it was like, oh, you know, just need to stay up. That objective's nearly been reached. So now the league placing is pretty much irrelevant to them. It's all about can they really roll the dice and go for it in Europe, which leads us nicely on to our Champions League preview. So I think we'll have to miss out Tuesday's game. So I don't think those ones will quite make the edit, but we can focus on the Wednesday games, I do believe. So we'll start with Atletico Madrid and Leicester. Anthony, do you reckon that was a good draw for them or a bad draw, in the sense that it's probably one of the toughest teams they probably could meet, because Atletico Madrid won't allow them to play their counter-attacking game than perhaps maybe Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich would?
Yeah, I think it's a terrible draw for Leicester, really, because of the way Atletico Madrid is set up to play. They're quite similar to Leicester in a way when they do defend, and you know, they're fantastic to watch. But from Leicester's point of view, it's a terrible draw, because, you know, against, say, a Barcelona, you can see Jamie Vardy having a go at a counter attack and that. So yeah, it's not a good draw. And Atletico Madrid after the big three, are probably the biggest side, you know, the worst side to get, or well, them or maybe Juve. But yeah, for me, it's probably the worst draw they could have got. And also, you know, had they got that Barcelona or Real Madrid, they would have had that glamour tie as well, and that would have been a better tie for the fans. You know, that memory, you know, remember when we played Barcelona. So yeah, I think it's sad for them, really, but you know, it might not be the end of the journey.
No, you're right, aren't you? You know, unfortunately, they've had quite an easy group. So was it Copenhagen, Porto, and
Bruges?
That's it, Bruges. So there's no glamour tie there. Sevilla, you know, nothing bad about that, but again, not top calibre. And again, Atletico Madrid, they're not quite there. So, Dmitri, same question to you. Do you reckon that it's probably the toughest draw they could have got?
Yes, I can see what Anthony's saying about how if they'd have played Real Madrid or Barcelona, there would have been perhaps been absolutely no shame in losing, and they would have just been the plucky underdog again. I think they already are, but they would have just been the plucky underdog. And even if they'd tried their best and lost, then they'd still be seen as heroes. Whereas I think with Atletico Madrid, they might just be able to quietly brush them aside to an extent. You know, I think Atletico Madrid are probably just going to go out there, not let the occasion get to them. They're good in Europe, and I think the only draw I think that would have really given Leicester a proper chance of going through would have been Monaco, and Monaco upset Man City, so they're no pushover. But I think at this stage, any draw is going to be any match is going to be tough. Perhaps Dortmund would have been a good one, but I think, any team at the quarterfinal stage, there's no mugs at this stage now, and I think any team will probably beat them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no easy draw, so this is just a byproduct of getting into this stage of the competition. If you're a Leicester fan, you probably want a nice jolly, or you want the glamour sort of tie. So going to Madrid's not bad. They've probably just got the wrong one, really, haven't they? But Anthony, if you are Craig Shakespeare, obviously you're not, but how do you set yourself up against Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid, and how do you sort of try and win that one? Because they're quite relentless in Europe and at home. It's a sort of bad combination of places to go to, really.
It is, and what Craig Shakespeare's got his success doing is what Leicester did last season, defend really deep, and that extreme counter-attack, it was a very extreme version of the counter-attacking tactics that won Leicester the league last year, and that's what that's what they should do against Atletico Madrid. That's their only chance, really. The thing, it takes you back, though, because it makes you really feel bad for Ranieri, in my view, because he did try a lot of different tactics. He tried the same tactics, he tried varying it, and he couldn't win no matter what he did. But yeah, for me, Craig Shakespeare's had that success bringing back last season's style, and that's what they've got to do. And if you've got two sides trying to counter-attack each other, they might cancel each other out. I don't know. But what's absolutely crucial is that they score an away goal. It's what got them through in the previous round, and they have to get an away goal. It's as simple as that for me.
Yeah, because if you remember against Sevilla when they were 2-0 down and everyone was ready to write them off, weren't they? I mean, Schmeichel had a very good game, kept them alive, but then Vardy turns the tie on its head, and then they do the business in the second leg. So if they are going to lose with grace, get a goal, and you never know what happens at the King Power. That's one of the two quarterfinals on Wednesday. The other, arguably the biggest of the round, is Bayern Munich versus Real Madrid. Dmitri, how do you see that one panning out?
Both teams are in very good form. Bayern Munich, to be fair, as usual. I have to admit I'm not 100% on this one, but I am 90% certain they're top of the Bundesliga. I was very shocked if they're not.
They're running away with it, so there's no wrong answer there.
As usual. And Real Madrid, I believe as well, have had a very good season this year. I'm not 100%, I'm going to come out and admit, but I believe they're top of the league as well.
They are, yep, you're doing all right. So.
Yep. Guesstimating a little bit, unfortunately, but my knowledge of foreign football isn't as good. I think that's going to be a really entertaining match for a neutral, unless, of course, they're both very cagey and they go into the game a bit afraid to, a bit afraid to make the first move, in which case it could be a bit boring. But if you're actually, that looks like a cracking tie, it really does, and it'll be interesting to see, the Allianz isn't an easy place to go. The Bayern Munich fans make a good atmosphere, they make it quite intimidating and hostile. And it'll be interesting to see how Real Madrid cope with going away to Bayern Munich first, how they come away with that. And then if they can set up, if they can set it up nicely for themselves for the second leg, if they can get a draw, then I can see them winning, and see them, beating Bayern Munich in the second leg and going through.
Interesting. Anthony, do you reckon there's a big subplot of Carlo Ancelotti facing the team that he won the Champions League title with in 2014? There we go. And do you sort of almost wish it's the final, because we've sort of been robbed of a real glamour final there, haven't we?
It is, yeah. It's a shame that the two couldn't have been kept apart, but I guess it's just the way it goes, isn't it?
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it though. I think it'll be cagey, but for me that doesn't mean it's it's not going to be a free-flowing attacking game. It's not going to be like a 3-2 win or anything like that. I think it'll be a cagey, 1 goal, 2 goals in it, sort 1 or 2 goals in the game, I should say. But that that doesn't stop it being an exciting game. I think those games for me can be, equally fun to watch, because it's that that pressure, that don't make a mistake. Both teams as well. They've been a bit not as good as they've been in previous seasons. Real Madrid made that fantastic start. Zidane continued his run, and then they've gone off the boil a little bit. It's sort of come back now. But Bayern Munich have been a bit. I know Ancelotti's been a bit under pressure. He's been not under pressure, but he's not. Bayern haven't been as good as they have been in previous years. But they're two two of the best teams, and it should be a great game.
Yeah, that's something we touched on your Euro podcast when I was your guest a few weeks back, that Bayern are not quite at the same level as what Pep was doing with them, but at the same time they're still running away with the Bundesliga. I think expectations are probably, they're being compared to that team, but they're still on course for a good season. I can't remember the exact score, but I know they gave Dortmund an absolute thumping at the weekend. So, it all seems well at the Allianz. Looking at Real Madrid, they drew in the Madrid derby on Saturday, and that was Barcelona's perfect opportunity to close the gap, but they lost to Malaga. So Madrid are, even more in the driving seat. So these are two in-form teams. I guess for Bayern, this is the real acid test because they're expected to win the German league anyway. But like you say, it's going to be cagey, but I don't think that's going to make it any less entertaining. It's going to be a game of sort of tactical chess, and I guess it's the student versus the master, isn't it? With Ancelotti and Zidane going head to head. What has Zidane learned under Ancelotti? We'll have to wait and see. I think that's probably about it for this week, actually. I think we've covered just about everything. Enjoy your football. Firstly, I've got to thank Anthony for coming back on the show again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Really enjoyed being on the show.
Not a problem, mate. We'll certainly get you back for your third cap soon. And it's been a great debut for Dmitri. Thanks very much, mate.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I'll be, if you'll have me back on, looking forward to making my getting my second cap, I should say.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope you guys have enjoyed my input.
Absolutely, mate. We'll have you back on the show. We're not sort of anti-championship, so if you get relegated, I'm sure we can have you back. There's nothing worried about that. So, but ultimately, best of luck for the rest of the season. I hope you stay up because I think you're sort of in a better position, and I just think that things are going your way, and Swansea are sort of on the way down. But I think all neutrals want some sort of relegation fight, but I don't envy the fans that are actually caught up in it. So, like I say, best of luck, and I just hope the nerves hold out. So, all that leaves for me is to say, my name's Dan Tracy. This is the Football Podcast. Until next week, good night.